November 28, 2024, Thanksgiving morning. While families across America gathered around tables filled with gratitude, a woman lay outside a brightly painted building in Savannah, Georgia. Butterflies decorated the walls. Children's toys were visible through the windows, but there would be no laughter here anymore. Just silence. And a question that would haunt an entire community. What brings a man to a daycare center in the middle of the night? And why would he bring a weapon? Around 1 o'clock in the morning, technology designed to detect danger picked up sounds that shattered the holiday calm. Within minutes, officers arrived at 1400 Augusta Avenue. What they found would transform Thanksgiving into a day of mourning for hundreds of people. A successful business owner, a beloved caregiver, a woman who believed everyone deserved a second chance. She had given one to the wrong person. This is the story of Cantrell Ross, and the man who made her pay the ultimate price for her kindness. In Savannah, Georgia, everyone knew Cantrell. Parents trusted her with their most precious treasures. Children begged to stay longer at her daycare. She had built something remarkable from absolutely nothing, painting walls with her own hands, decorating the outside with bright colors and butterflies, creating a space where kids felt safe and loved. Cantrell Ross was 34 years old when her life ended, but before we understand how it ended, we need to understand who she was. Because her story deserves to be told in full. Born and raised in Savannah, Cantrell grew up in a close-knit family where love and support flowed freely. Her mother, Amanda Hayes, watched her daughter dream of working with children from an early age. Even as a young girl, Cantrell gravitated toward caring for others. She was the one organizing neighborhood kids, creating games, making sure everyone felt included. That compassionate spirit, that natural ability to nurture, never faded as she grew older. After high school, Cantrell pursued formal training in early childhood development. She studied the theories, learned the best practices, understood child psychology and developmental milestones. But more than the technical knowledge, she brought something that couldn't be taught: genuine love for the work. She completed her certifications and worked in various childcare settings, learning from each experience, building relationships with families, understanding what parents truly needed. Then Cantrell made a decision that would change countless lives. She would open her own daycare center. Not just any daycare, but a place that reflected her values, her vision, her heart. She would call it Friend Zone Learning Academy. Starting from home-based care, she built the business from scratch. The resources were limited. The challenges were real and constant. But Cantrell never hesitated, never wavered in her commitment. She painted rooms herself, choosing bright colors that would stimulate young minds and create joy. She decorated the exterior with butterflies, symbols of transformation and beauty that would become synonymous with her legacy. She used her own money to buy supplies when funds ran short, never allowing financial constraints to diminish the quality of care she provided. During the pandemic, when the world shut down and families struggled in isolation, Cantrell refused to abandon the children who depended on her. When families lacked internet access for remote learning, she personally delivered learning packets to homes across the community. She checked on families, offered encouragement, maintained connections during the darkest days of uncertainty. Her commitment went far beyond business obligations. This was a calling, a purpose, a mission she fulfilled with her whole heart. The trust she built ran deep and authentic. Parents didn't just drop their children off and leave. They knew their kids were safe, loved, and genuinely cared for. Waiting lists developed because word spread through the community about the quality of care Cantrell provided. Children regularly asked if they could stay past pickup time, not wanting to leave the environment she had created. Some kids cried when their parents came early. That's not something you can fake or manufacture. That's the result of genuine love and dedication, creating a space where children feel valued and protected. Her generosity extended far beyond the contracted hours and official duties of running a daycare. Emergency childcare calls came at odd times, sometimes late at night when a parent faced unexpected circumstances. Cantrell answered. A struggling young mother needed guidance on child development or parenting strategies. Cantrell mentored them, sharing not just professional knowledge but personal encouragement. Community fundraisers needed organization? She stepped up, using her networks and energy to support causes beyond her own business. When families faced financial hardship and couldn't afford full tuition, Cantrell worked with them, never turning away a child because of money. She understood that her work was about more than profit. It was about community. It was about giving children the best possible start in life, regardless of their family's circumstances. Those who knew her personally described Cantrell with words that painted a vivid picture of her presence. Outspoken meant she didn't hide her opinions or pretend to be someone she wasn't. If she disagreed with something, you knew it. If she supported you, you felt it completely. Confident meant she walked through life with her head up, believing in her own abilities and the value she brought to her community. Humorous meant she could lighten any situation, finding joy and laughter even in challenging moments. Her family called her the fun of the bunch, the person who made gatherings brighter, who turned ordinary moments into celebrations, who reminded everyone not to take life too seriously. There was something else Cantrell believed deeply. Everyone deserves a second chance. That belief, as beautiful as it was, would cost her everything. Early in 2024, Cantrell met someone. His name was Terrell Nelson. He was 31 years old. And unlike Cantrell's life of stability and success, his life told a very different story. Terrell Nelson had a long history with the criminal justice system. By the time he met Cantrell, he had spent years cycling through arrests and incarcerations, each one adding another layer to a deeply troubling pattern. His record painted a disturbing picture of a man who had been given opportunity after opportunity, yet consistently chose violence and crime. In March 2013, at 19 years old, Terrell was charged with taking another person's life. The victim, Ahmed Williams, was shot on his own front porch on 54th Street in what should have been the safety of his home. A neighbor witnessed everything, watching the violence unfold in real time. The testimony was clear, the evidence present. Despite the eyewitness account, both Terrell and his co-defendant, Jermaine Grant, were ultimately acquitted. The legal system gave him a pass, but the pattern of violence had already begun to establish itself, a preview of what would come in the years ahead. Between 2014 and 2017, arrests continued to pile up, each one documenting another instance of Terrell's inability or unwillingness to live peacefully in society. Simple battery charges showed he was comfortable using physical force against others. Possession of illegal substances indicated ongoing involvement with criminal activity. Criminal trespass demonstrated a disregard for boundaries and property rights. Most concerning were the allegations of domestic violence, suggesting a pattern of harm specifically directed toward intimate partners. Multiple parole violations showed he couldn't or wouldn't comply even with basic supervision requirements. Each time the system gave him another opportunity. Each time he demonstrated that change was not coming. 2018 brought major escalation in the severity of his crimes. Armed robbery meant he was willing to threaten people with weapons to take what didn't belong to him. Aggravated assault showed increasing violence. Fleeing from law enforcement demonstrated consciousness of guilt and unwillingness to face consequences. Perhaps most telling was his illegal possession of a weapon as a convicted felon. He knew the law prohibited him from having weapons. He obtained one anyway. The message was clear. Rules didn't apply to him. This time, prison couldn't be avoided. He was sentenced and began serving time. He served 3 years behind bars, released in 2021 with standard conditions of parole. Those conditions were meant to provide structure, accountability, a framework for rebuilding his life. But structure requires commitment. Accountability requires honesty. Rebuilding requires effort. Terrell demonstrated none of these qualities. After release, Terrell's life remained fundamentally unstable. He had no permanent housing, moving between relatives and acquaintances, dependent on others for shelter. He had no steady employment, no career path, no legitimate source of income. He had no vehicle, limiting his mobility and independence. He had no financial stability whatsoever. He drifted through life, monitored by parole supervision, but fundamentally unchanged in his core patterns of behavior. The system watched him, but watching isn't the same as preventing. Monitoring isn't the same as transforming. This was the man Cantrell would meet in early 2024. A man with a documented history of violence toward partners and strangers. A man who had been incarcerated 10 times. A man who used others for resources but offered nothing in return. Experts in criminal psychology would later examine his profile. The pattern was clear. Refusal to accept accountability, inability to maintain stability, manipulation tactics, and a disturbing comfort with violence. This was his 10th time being incarcerated, but Cantrell didn't see a criminal record. She saw potential. We don't know exactly how they met. What we do know is that in February 2024, Cantrell posted Valentine's Day photos. Her excitement was visible in every caption. She was radiant, hopeful, invested. Cantrell poured herself into this relationship. She paid his bills. She bought his food. She gave him a place to stay. She pushed him toward job training programs. She encouraged him to reconnect with his children. She supported every attempt he claimed to make at turning his life around. But those close to Cantrell noticed something immediately. In every photograph, Terrell's face remained blank. No smile, no warmth, no reciprocal affection. His body language screamed detachment. Friends described his energy as off. While Cantrell glowed with hope, Terrell appeared cold, expressionless, absent. She saw what she wanted to see. A person she could help. Everyone else saw what was actually there. Danger. Love, or perhaps compassion, can make us blind to what stands right in front of us. Cantrell believed in redemption. She believed people could change. She believed her investment would matter. And for a while, Terrell allowed her to believe these things. Because he was getting exactly what he needed. Stability without effort. Support without reciprocity. Resources without responsibility. By May and June of 2024, the relationship began to shift. Cantrell had decided that she didn't want to be with him anymore. Terrell stopped showing appreciation for anything she did. The gratitude that should accompany receiving help disappeared entirely as his comfort level rose. He started making demands rather than requests. Delete those posts of us. The relationship that Cantrell had celebrated publicly, that she had been proud to share with friends and family, now became something he wanted hidden from view. This wasn't about privacy. This was about control beginning to take root. July and August brought clear escalation that moved beyond uncomfortable into dangerous territory. Verbal attacks increased in frequency and intensity. He made belittling comments about her appearance, attacking the very essence of who she was. Public insults appeared on social media where friends and family could see them. One word would haunt this entire case, appearing again and again like a weapon he couldn't put down. Ugly. Over and over, in public forums and private conversations, Terrell called Cantrell ugly. He weaponized this word, using it to diminish her, to make her question her worth, to establish dominance through humiliation. The psychology behind this pattern is well documented by experts in domestic violence. When someone repeatedly insults their partner's appearance, they're not expressing genuine aesthetic opinion. They're attempting to erode self-esteem, to create dependency, to establish a power dynamic where the victim begins to believe they're lucky to have anyone at all. The message underneath the insult is always the same. You're worthless. You should be grateful I'm with you. No one else would want you. If that message takes root, the victim becomes easier to control. Her social media posts became windows into what was happening behind closed doors, digital breadcrumbs showing a relationship turning toxic in real time. I poured out my cup so much for him, she wrote in words that would later take on heartbreaking significance. Now that my cup is empty, he won't even give me a sip back. The metaphor was perfect and painful. She had given everything. He had taken everything. Now that she had nothing left to give, he offered nothing in return. Another post read simply, "I feel used and abused." These weren't just thoughts shared with the internet. These were warnings, written in real time by someone starting to see the truth of her situation. Someone beginning to realize that love and compassion had been met with exploitation and harm. Terrell responded publicly with cold, calculated dismissal. "I really didn't lose anything. Be good. God bless you." The words carried layers of cruelty. He was telling her, and everyone watching, that she had meant nothing to him, that her investment had been worthless, that her leaving caused him no pain because she had provided no real value. The message was designed to wound, to make her question whether caring for him had been a mistake, to plant seeds of doubt about her own judgment and worth. But behind that public dismissal, something else was happening that revealed the truth of his obsession. He watched every post she made, every story she shared, every update to her status. While pretending not to care, he monitored her obsessively, keeping track of her movements, her thoughts, her connections. This contradiction between claimed indifference and actual behavior is a hallmark of dangerous relationships. When someone says you mean nothing but tracks your every move, the truth is clear. They see you as a possession, not a person, and possessions aren't allowed to leave. The pattern experts recognize in domestic violence cases was emerging clearly. Possessiveness without reciprocity, demands for changes while offering nothing, insults timed perfectly to follow boundary setting, public humiliation as a control tactic. The psychology was textbook. When someone uses insults repeatedly, they're attempting to convince their partner of worthlessness. If she believes she's worthless, she'll stay. If she believes no one else will want her, she won't leave. Friends intervened. They urged Cantrell to stay away. They saw the warning signs she couldn't yet see. But leaving someone you've invested everything in is extraordinarily difficult. Hope is powerful. The belief that change is possible can override every rational warning. Victims stay because they've already given so much. Walking away feels like admitting failure, wasting investment, giving up on potential. Before we continue with what happened next, I want to take a moment to say thank you. Your support means everything to this channel. The stories we tell, the research we conduct, the truth we uncover, all of this happens because you're here. If you want to go deeper, unlock exclusive content, and directly support the work we do, consider joining our YouTube membership. Your contribution keeps these important stories alive and helps us create the content you value. Thank you for being part of this community. Later months in 2024 marked a turning point. Cantrell made a decision. She finally chose herself. She ended the relationship definitively. She cut off communication. She focused her energy back where it belonged, on Friend Zone Learning Academy and the children who depended on her. Slowly, Cantrell reclaimed her life, her space, her home, her business. Mental clarity returned, emotional stability rebuilt. Plans for expansion came back into focus. Joy began returning to her days. She was moving forward, thriving without him. But while Cantrell reclaimed everything, Terrell lost everything. The stable housing? Gone. The financial support? Gone. The emotional encouragement? Gone. The person who believed in him when no one else did? Gone. His life reverted to exactly what it had been before Cantrell. Nothing. Experts who study intimate partner violence will tell you something critical. For men like Terrell, a breakup doesn't register as heartbreak. It registers as loss of resource, loss of control, loss of status. Research consistently shows that the most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive relationship is when she leaves. Leaving doesn't end the danger, it intensifies it. Cantrell wasn't a person to Terrell. She was a possession, and possessions don't get to walk away. Outwardly, he maintained the dismissive attitude, pretended not to care, but internally, rage was building. He couldn't accept that she had moved on. He couldn't accept that she was better off without him. Every day she lived peacefully without acknowledging him was a blow to his ego. Throughout November 2024, as Thanksgiving approached, Cantrell focused on what she loved. She ignored his attempts to contact her. She didn't engage. She didn't respond. Her social media presence continued, but now it centered entirely on her business, planning meals, organizing activities, preparing for the holiday season at the daycare. Meanwhile, Terrell was watching. Every post, every story, every update. His life remained unstable and unsupported. Hers remained stable and thriving. The contrast ate away at him. Research on stalking behavior shows that monitoring an ex-partner obsessively indicates extremely high risk for violence. Every happy post Cantrell made reminded Terrell of his failure. Every day she didn't acknowledge his existence delivered another blow. The loss of control was unbearable. Between November 20th and November 27th, Cantrell's schedule filled with Thanksgiving preparations, community activities, planning daycare holiday events. Her final days were spent doing the work she loved most. She had no idea that Terrell's obsession had reached a critical point. No documented threats existed in the system. No restraining order had been filed. Parole supervision, despite his violent history, failed to flag escalating behavior. The warning signs were there, visible to anyone looking closely. But the systems designed to protect victims didn't act. Domestic violence advocates would later ask, could this have been prevented? When someone shows you who they are, shouldn't we believe them the first time? The question haunts everyone who knew what was coming. November 27th, 2024, the night before Thanksgiving. The 1400 block of Augusta Avenue in Savannah, Georgia sat quiet. Families prepared for the holiday. Cantrell was inside her daycare kitchen, cooking, preparing food for Thanksgiving. A close friend was with her for company and safety. The space around her reflected everything she had built. Bright colors, cheerful decorations, children's artwork. This was her sanctuary, the place where she had created joy for hundreds of families. Then Terrell showed up, unannounced, uninvited. How did he know she would be there? Had he been watching, waiting, planning? What happened next was witnessed. Cantrell's friend heard voices rising, saw the confrontation escalating. Terrell asked for another chance. Cantrell said no. Firmly. Finally. She was done. He called her ugly one more time. The insult he had used throughout their relationship became his weapon even in these final moments. The argument escalated quickly, the air charged with rage. Then came the sound that would shatter everything. Terrell pulled out a weapon. Shots rang out into the night. Cantrell collapsed outside her daycare. The ground where children played became the place where she lost her life. Around 1 o'clock in the morning on November 28, 2024, ShotSpotter technology detected the sound. Savannah Police Department received the alert immediately and dispatched officers. They arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Cantrell Ross was pronounced deceased at the scene. She was 34 years old. Her life, so full of promise and purpose, had been violently cut short. The scene told a heartbreaking story. Bright butterflies still decorated the walls. Children's learning materials were visible through windows. A place designed for joy and laughter had been transformed into a location of profound loss. This was where Cantrell built dreams. This was where someone destroyed hers. The witness provided a full account to law enforcement. Description of Terrell. The direction he fled. Every detail of the confrontation. As evidence was collected throughout the night, a community prepared to wake up on Thanksgiving morning to absolute horror. November 28, 2024, Thanksgiving Day. News spread through Savannah like wildfire. Parents who were supposed to drop their children off at Friend Zone Learning Academy arrived to find a scene they couldn't process. Police presence, crime scene tape. Their beloved Miss Cantrell was gone. Law enforcement issued active warrants for Terrell Nelson, 31 years old. Charges pending: malice murder, aggravated assault. A warning went out to the community. He was considered armed and dangerous. The shock was overwhelming. Disbelief paralyzed families. Parents who had trusted Cantrell with their children's care struggled to comprehend. How do you explain this to young kids? How do you tell a 4-year-old that Miss Cantrell isn't coming back? The daycare remained closed. Flowers began appearing outside. What should have been a day of gratitude became a day of grief. Terrell had fled immediately. Law enforcement tracked his movements through Savannah. He moved between relatives' homes. For several days, the manhunt continued. December 2, 2024, brought resolution. Officers located Terrell at a relative's house in Savannah. He was arrested without incident. No resistance, no drama. He had taken a life violently, but surrendered quietly. The contrast was chilling. Formal charges were filed: murder, aggravated assault, and parole violation. This was Terrell Nelson's 10th incarceration. This time would be his last as a free man. On December 2, 2024, as evening fell, hundreds gathered outside Friend Zone Learning Academy. Candles flickered against the growing darkness. Balloons in Cantrell's favorite colors were released toward the sky. The vigil was a testament to how deeply she had touched this community. Her mother, Amanda Hayes, spoke through tears, but with dignity. These kids were her life. She was going to do this daycare. I never doubted her. She did everything from the heart. Family members addressed the crowd. You took someone with a big heart who loved others as herself. Their grief was raw, but their love for Cantrell was clear. Parents from the daycare shared testimonies. Their children were asking where Miss Cantrell went. How do you answer that? How do you explain violence to innocence? Pastors offered prayers. Local officials acknowledged the devastating loss. Everyone called for justice. The memorial grew. Flowers covered the building, stuffed animals, cards, drawings from children who would never see their teacher again. The bright butterflies remained visible on the walls. A business that would never reopen. A dream ended by violence. The tragedy sparked broader conversation. Domestic violence in Black communities. The importance of supporting women in dangerous relationships without judgment. System failures that leave victims unprotected despite clear warning signs. The community mourned, but they also demanded answers. In December 2024, Terrell appeared in Chatham County Court for his initial hearing. A defense attorney was appointed. At that stage, prosecutors highlighted his long criminal history, the seriousness of the charges, and the fact that he was on parole at the time of the shooting, and the judge ordered that he remain in custody without bond. There had also been a prior case in 2013 in which he was accused in another killing but ultimately acquitted. In early 2025, the case moved forward in the Chatham County courts toward Superior Court. As of now, he remains jailed without bond, and the case is still pending, with additional hearings and pretrial steps ahead. Terrell entered a plea of not guilty. He has requested a trial by jury. As of now, the legal process continues with status conferences and pre-trial preparations. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they are turning. The defense strategy will likely attempt to frame this as a heated argument gone wrong, a crime of passion, an attempt to minimize any suggestion of planning or premeditation. They will try to paint this as a moment that spiraled beyond control rather than a calculated act. But the prosecution is building something comprehensive. They're assembling evidence of a pattern that spans years. The timeline of the relationship documented through social media. Evidence of monitoring and harassment behavior. The history of verbal attacks, particularly the repeated use of ugly as a weapon designed to diminish and control. His refusal to accept the breakup. The harassment that continued after separation. Showing up unannounced with a weapon. And perhaps most damning, his extensive history of violence stretching back over a decade, showing this wasn't an aberration, but a pattern. Key evidence will include witness testimony from the friend who was present that night, ShotSpotter timestamp and location data that pinpoints exactly when and where this happened, social media posts documenting the progression from hope to control to verbal harm, text messages if they exist, Terrell's complete criminal history showing 10 prior incarcerations, and the fact that at the time of this incident, he was actively violating the terms of his parole. The prosecution's argument is expected to be straightforward and devastating. This was not passion. This was control. This was not spontaneous. This was the culmination of stalking and obsession that had been building throughout November. Cantrell's independence threatened his ego. Her success embarrassed him. Her leaving humiliated him. He didn't end her life in a moment of uncontrollable rage. He ended it because she dared to be free, because she chose herself, because she walked away from someone who offered nothing but took everything. When the trial eventually takes place, it will follow patterns seen in many intimate partner violence cases that reach courtrooms across America. Opening statements will paint two very different pictures. One of a beloved community member, whose generosity and belief in second chances cost her everything, and another of a man with over a decade of documented violence who finally took that violence to its ultimate, irreversible conclusion. Witness testimony will be emotional and detailed when it comes. The friend who was there that night will recount what they saw and heard. The argument escalating, the final insult, the sounds that shattered everything. Cantrell's family will describe who she was beyond this tragedy. Her dreams, her dedication, her heart. They'll detail what she gave to someone who returned only harm. Parents from the daycare will testify about her character and the permanent hole her absence has created in countless young lives. Law enforcement will present technical evidence that removes ambiguity. ShotSpotter data showing the exact timing. Crime scene documentation. The arrest and what preceded it. The investigation that built the case piece by piece. Domestic violence experts may be called to provide crucial context about the pattern of behavior documented throughout the relationship. They will explain stalking dynamics and why obsessive monitoring of an ex-partner indicates extremely high risk for violence. They will detail control tactics, particularly how verbal degradation erodes a victim's sense of self-worth. They will share the well-documented fact, backed by decades of research, that the most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive relationship is precisely when she makes the decision to leave. Leaving doesn't end the danger. Often, tragically, it intensifies it. The defense will face significant challenges. Character witnesses may testify about moments of humanity they observed, but those moments will be weighed against a mountain of evidence documenting patterns of violence. Any attempt to establish a heat of passion defense will be challenged by facts that suggest otherwise. He brought a weapon to her workplace. He had been monitoring her movements in social media. His criminal history shows violence was his pattern and his default response to frustration or perceived loss of control. Prosecutors will argue what the evidence shows. This wasn't a man who lost control in a single moment. This was a man who never possessed genuine self-control. When he lost access to someone who provided everything, housing, financial support, emotional encouragement, belief in his potential. When she dared to reclaim her own life and pursue her own peace, he chose destruction. That's not passion. That's predation. That's what happens when someone views a partner not as a person with autonomy, but as a possession that exists to serve their needs. Even before this case ever reaches a jury, one question already echoes through everyone's mind. If he claimed she was ugly, why couldn't he leave her alone? The answer lies in understanding what this was really about. It was never about physical appearance. It was never about romantic feelings. It was always about control. The entitlement was staggering. He believed he had a right to her support. He believed she owed him despite contributing nothing. Her success without him was unacceptable. Her happiness without him was intolerable. The final act came when he couldn't accept that she had moved on, couldn't accept that she was better off. The psychology behind, "if I can't have you, no one will," represents the deadliest mindset in domestic violence. Statistics support this reality. Women face greater danger from intimate partners than from strangers. Leaving an abusive relationship increases risk of violence by 70%. Over half of women who are taken from this world by intimate partners lose their lives after the breakup. Black women face disproportionate rates of intimate partner violence compared to other demographics. Understanding these patterns can save lives. Cantrell's family has turned their tragedy into education. Their mission now focuses on helping other women recognize danger before it's too late. They push for system changes that might prevent future losses. They want everyone to know specific warning signs. First, financial dependency without reciprocity. When a partner takes everything but gives nothing back. When you're paying for everything while they contribute nothing. When they treat your sacrifices as obligations rather than gifts. Second, Absence of gratitude, when your efforts are expected, never appreciated, when entitlement replaces thankfulness, when thank you disappears from their vocabulary. Third, hostility, when you set boundaries, when saying no triggers anger, when asserting yourself results in punishment, when your needs are treated as betrayals. Fourth, social media monitoring and control, when they watch every post and story, when they demand you remove content, when they attempt to control your online presence and connections. Fifth, insults designed to regain power, when verbal attacks follow your standing up for yourself, when degradation becomes their tool to keep you under control, when they make you question your worth. Sixth, refusal to accept the end of a relationship, when they show up unannounced, when they ignore clear boundaries, when their behavior escalates after separation rather than decreasing. The most dangerous sign of all, when someone won't let you leave peacefully. This is when help becomes most critical. Beyond this case, beyond the violence, we need to remember who Cantrell Ross actually was. She was a caregiver who impacted hundreds of children's lives. She created a safe, nurturing environment where kids felt valued and loved. During the pandemic, when others shut down, she found ways to continue education. She mentored struggling families who had nowhere else to turn. She was a daughter who made her mother proud, someone who fulfilled her dreams despite obstacles, someone beloved by her entire family. She was an entrepreneur who built a business from nothing. She employed others in her community. She planned expansion. She contributed economically and socially to Savannah. She was a woman, confident, outspoken, full of humor, generous to a fault, a believer in redemption. Her kindness was not weakness. It was her greatest strength. What was stolen extends beyond one life. The second daycare that will never open, the children who will never experience her care, the families who will never receive her guidance, the laughter that will never echo in those brightly painted rooms, the dreams that will never be realized. Friend Zone Learning Academy remains closed. The building stands as a memorial. The neighborhood changed forever. You can't measure the impact of a life by counting years. You measure it by counting the hearts broken when that life ends. Questions remain about system failures. Terrell was on parole when he took Cantrell's life. This was his 10th incarceration. Multiple violent offenses marked his record. A prior accusation of taking someone's life, though he was acquitted. Why was he released? What supervision was actually in place? Could this have been prevented? Risk assessment failed. No documented threats existed in official records. No restraining order had been filed. His history of domestic violence wasn't flagged by the systems meant to protect potential victims. The system didn't protect Cantrell. Her family now advocates for reform. Stricter parole conditions for repeat violent offenders. Enhanced monitoring including GPS tracking for those with domestic violence histories. Mandatory counseling that actually addresses violent patterns. They call for better protection for victims, easier access to restraining orders, faster responses to violations, increased funding for support services that help women leave safely. They demand accountability for repeat offenders, consideration of enhanced sentencing for patterns of violence, life sentences for those who demonstrate they cannot stop harming others. 10 arrests should have been enough, they say, and they're right. The broader conversation touches difficult territory. Mass incarceration versus public safety, rehabilitation versus protection, second chances versus community risk. Who gets to decide when someone has had enough opportunities? These questions have no easy answers, but Cantrell's case demonstrates what happens when systems fail to protect the vulnerable from those with documented patterns of harm. Today, Terrell Nelson remains in custody in Chatham County, awaiting trial on murder and related charges. He has pleaded not guilty, and under the law he is presumed innocent unless and until a jury decides otherwise. Cantrell should be 34 years old, planning her second location, celebrating holidays with family, caring for children who loved her, living the life she built with her own hands. Instead, her family faces grief that doesn't fade. Holidays marked by absence. Justice was served in court. but their daughter isn't coming back. Winning in court doesn't bring her back, her mother says. The pain in those words is immeasurable. The community continues to feel the loss. Children ask where Miss Cantrell went. Parents found new childcare, but it's not the same. The neighborhood changed. Trust was shaken. The impact ripples outward, touching lives in ways that can't be quantified. For society, Cantrell represents another preventable loss. Another woman gone at the hands of an intimate partner. Another case study in system failure. Another name added to a list that grows far too long. Hundreds of women in the United States are taken from their families by current or former partners every year. Cantrell Ross was one of them. Many showed warning signs. Many tried to leave. Many believed in second chances. Many gave everything they had to help someone change. The question remains, how many more women must we lose before we take domestic violence seriously? The image that stays with those who knew her. Friend Zone Learning Academy. Butterflies still visible on the walls. Flowers still placed outside by a community that hasn't forgotten. An empty building. A silent playground. A life of service ended by violence. A woman who believed in redemption, taken by someone who never earned it. Cantrell's mother speaks to people, sharing words that carry both unbearable loss and urgent hope. My daughter saw the best in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. Even when it cost her everything. I want people to remember her, not for how she died, but for how she lived, with an open heart and open hands. But I also want people to learn from this. Love shouldn't cost you your life. Kindness shouldn't get you killed. If you see the signs, run. Run fast. Run far. Don't look back. Because my daughter can't come back, and I don't want another mother to feel what I feel. Those words should echo in every heart, every mind, every community. Because Cantrell's story isn't unique. It's one of too many. But it doesn't have to keep happening. We can do better. We must do better. Communities can create networks of support that make leaving safer. Friends and family can learn to recognize warning signs and offer help without judgment. Systems can prioritize protection over paperwork, action over observation. Laws can reflect the reality that patterns of violence don't change without intervention. Resources can reach the people who need them most, when they need them most. Cantrell gave second chances because she believed in human potential. That belief was beautiful. That belief was also dangerous when extended to someone who had demonstrated repeatedly that violence was his answer to every challenge. The lesson isn't to stop believing in people. The lesson is to believe patterns when they show themselves clearly. A history of arrests and violence told a story. 10 incarcerations told a story. Violence against partners and strangers told a story. That story predicted exactly what would happen when he lost control over someone who finally chose herself. Cantrell Ross built a place of joy. She nurtured children, supported families, and gave opportunities to someone who repaid her kindness with violence. Her legacy shouldn't be defined by how her life ended. Her legacy should be defined by how she lived, with generosity, with purpose, with love that extended far beyond what was required or expected. The butterflies she painted on those walls still flutter in memory. The children she cared for still carry lessons she taught them. The families she supported still remember her warmth. The community she served still speaks her name with reverence. That's the real Cantrell Ross. That's who she was. That's what Terrell Nelson took from the world. But he couldn't take her impact. He couldn't erase the love she planted in hundreds of hearts. He couldn't undo the good she created. He took her life, but he couldn't take her legacy. That belongs to everyone she touched. That lives on in every child who learned to read in her care, every parent who found support in her kindness, every person who witnessed her generosity and thought, I want to be like that. Rest in peace, Cantrell Ross. Your light continues to shine through everyone you touched. Your story will save lives because people are listening, learning, recognizing danger, and choosing differently. That's your legacy now. Not the violence that ended your life, but the awareness your story creates. Not the man who took you from us, but the countless people who will survive because they learned from your loss. Gone but never, ever forgotten. Your name, your work, your heart, your impact, all of it eternal, all of it meaningful, all of it cherished by a community that loved you and a world that needed you and continues to need the lessons your story teaches. Thank you, Cantrell, for everything you gave while you were here. And thank you to everyone watching for honoring her memory by learning, by sharing, by caring enough to watch. Until the end. That's how we keep her story alive. That's how we turn tragedy into change. That's how we make sure her life mattered, not just to those who knew her, but to everyone who hears her name and understands that love should never, ever cost you your life. Thank you for allowing us to tell Cantrell's story with the respect and depth she deserves. Her memory lives on through every person who learns from her loss, through every woman who recognizes danger and chooses safety, through every community that decides to do better in protecting the vulnerable. If you found value in this content, if these stories matter to you, please subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell. Your subscription tells us this matters. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. And if you want to directly support the creation of content that honors victims and educates communities, consider joining our membership program. Members get access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes research, and extended interviews. More importantly, your financial support makes it possible for us to continue investigating cases that deserve attention, giving voice to victims whose stories might otherwise be forgotten. The comments section below is yours. What case should we examine next? What story needs to be told? What injustice needs exposure? Your voice shapes what we create. This channel exists because you're here, because you care about truth, because you believe victims deserve to be remembered as full human beings rather than statistics. Let's keep that conversation going. Let's keep learning together. Let's keep demanding better from the systems meant to protect us.